Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from @AKwx TV to @NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Hello and welcome to today's show. First up, we've got the hazardous weather graphic here and a wind advisory there for the eastern Alaska range and on out toward Delta Junction. Actually for until 10 p.m. this evening for winds of 30 to 40 miles an hour, or 20 to 35 miles an hour, with gusts to 50 miles an hour, occurring again until 10 p.m. this evening. So pretty breezy evening coming up for those areas, as you saw today. That's for areas like Black Rapids, Donnelly Dome, Delta Junction, Dot Lake. And from there, moving on to satellite imagery, and you can see moisture here, form of a front in the Gulf of Alaska, mostly sliding from southeast to northwest here. Very little movement to the frontal boundary itself, kind of hung up near Kodiak Island, and main low center kind of drifting off to the southeast a little bit there. Another band of moisture here, bringing clouds into the northern panhandle today, but a lot of sunshine down to the south there, and of course over into Canada, and pretty mild temperatures over the southern southeast coast, rising into the mid-60s at mid-afternoon, places like Ketchikan over toward Misty Fjords, and rain along the immediate coast, heaviest over western Prince William Sound, and then clouds moving up over the interior there. Not much in the way of any precipitation associated with that of any significance, just some variable mid and high level clouds, and keeping temperatures down a little bit into the 50s into the afternoon here for the eastern interior. And of course a little cooler up toward the Arctic coast, but not really anything cold, and not much going on here over the Alaska Peninsula area. And then out to the west, the next system pushing some light rain in toward the central Aleutians, extending back toward Chimney-Attu, and that whole mess expected to drop off to the southeast tonight and really become a non-factor. Otherwise today you can already see this bulk of this moisture already starting to take off to the southeast. This will just kind of dissipate up over the Bering Sea tonight as the main system drops southeastward. High pressure kind of takes over the western Bering Sea. Northeast wind flow pushes drier air down into the Aleutians eventually. And on the chart today, you can see that low center out there in the west near Shimmy, about 999 millibars, pushing some rain as far east as about Adak, but nothing too heavy. About 1/100 of an inch fell at Atka. And drier conditions up here to the northeast with high pressure over the Russian Far East. And then low pressure here, well, south-southeast Kodiak Island, but that front right about in this position here, southeast flow carrying that moisture up to the north. Pretty gusty winds associated with that front. Let's see the Delta Junction up here really don't have the, it doesn't look like the gradient supports it, but actually does. Had wind gusts, peak wind gusts of 44 miles an hour, and Gulkana about 35 miles an hour out of the south today, and gusts to about 45 miles an hour in Middleton Island. Strongest winds here in the Barren Islands. They had east winds up to about 53 miles per hour there, and rain about half an inch falling in Kodiak, 1/4 of an inch at Seward today, and a little over an inch falling at Portage Glacier. Kind of a wet, or it was a wet day there with some gusty east winds blowing. Otherwise, the interior dry, isolated showers over toward the eastern border. And again, some variable clouds in over the northern panhandle, otherwise partly to mostly sunny for areas on down to the south. And for tonight, we'll see that system out west does take off to the southeast by about 3 a.m. tomorrow, just dampens into a trough, and all the moisture now south of the Aleutians. It becomes a non-factor as this northeast flow takes over. Pretty dry, but a lot of clouds here over the Bering Sea, back up into the Bering Strait. Maybe an isolated shower or two that probably won't hit anything out there, not even the Pribilofs. Chances of showers here for the western Alaska Range. Chance of moisture continues for the North Gulf Coast, and gale force winds tonight here continue for the North Gulf Coast into the Barren Islands, maybe even Kamishak Bay. This front pretty well stalled out, edging eastward a little bit tonight, but staying west of the Panhandle with mostly clear skies there. Dry over the interior, light winds, especially up along the north slope in the northwest part of the state and the Arctic coast. Not too bad. And so taking a look at the forecast for Wednesday, this front edges a little farther to the east, but again, not making getting anywhere near the Panhandle. So you can look at another partly to mostly sunny day with light winds there, maybe a risk of a shower. Most of that's going to stay over in British Columbia. So another nice day there for the southeast coast. Dry over the interior, and this moisture hanging up right along the immediate coastline. In fact, barely getting up into, say, Cordova. And then better chances for western Prince William Sound, Seward, up to Whittier, Portage, and those areas, and southern Cook Inland to Kamishak Bay, Kodiak Island. Wet day tomorrow. Light rain, fog, drizzle throughout the entire day. Not too bad on the winds. A little brisker out here. Northeast winds on the increase here a little bit here for the Pribilofs. 15 to maybe gusts of 30 miles an hour. That'll come down to the eastern Aleutians there with the risk of a shower front. Alaska. Probably dry for Nikolsky. Better chance of some showers for the Alaska Peninsula area, but variably cloudy. Maybe a few more clearing areas up here over the interior and what I have shown. That extends all the way out to the Arctic coast. High pressure in control of the western Bering Sea. And for the outlook on Thursday, next front tries to push eastward here again with maybe some rain into Shimianatu, possibly Kiska Island. High pressure shifts eastward a little bit. Winds diminish here over the eastern Bering Sea with ridging high pressure up to the north slope there. Mostly sunny skies here over the western interior down into Togiak, Bristol Bay. Even the interior partly and mostly sunny. Nice dry light winds, and this remnants of this front keeps clouds and a chance of some scattered shower activity along the North Gulf Coast back down toward Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet area. And finally that front pushes eastward, kind of weakening on its way in, but that'll bring a chance of increasing chance of rain for the southeast coast during the day on Thursday. Lows tonight, lower to mid-40s there for the southeast coast. In the 30s to near 40 everywhere else inland Alaska, except lower 40s for Kodiak Island. And highs tomorrow, lower 50s Bristol Bay, mid-50s for the Kuskokwim Valley. And in the 50s, south central Alaska here, except Kodiak with clouds and rain, drizzle, keeping it in the mid-40s for the highs. Lower 50s the Copper River Basin, and 50s to mid-60s for the southeast coast. And lows in the 40s, mid-40s for the Panhandle, lower 40s here, south central Alaska, a little cooler in the Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin, and Kuskokwim Valley, near 40 for Bristol Bay. Highs 55 to 60 for the Kuskokwim Valley, 50s to lower 60s now for the Susitna Valley and Manuska Valley, as well as the Kenai Peninsula area, and upper 50s, lower 60s, Copper River Basin, in the 50s for Bristol Bay, and in the 50s for the Panhandle. Up north, lows tonight in the 30s, central interior, teens from the Brooks Range on out and into the Bering Strait, followed by highs tomorrow in the 60s, a little warmer tomorrow for the eastern interior areas, and then 25 to 37 for the Seward Peninsula, in the 20s for the North Slope, and the lows right around 40, Eagle, possibly down to 31, otherwise 20s for the Brooks Range, teens and 20s for the Arctic coast and North Slope to the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island, followed by highs 60 to 65, 67, maybe even 68 in some locations over the upper Yukon Valley areas. And for the southwest coast, lows tonight 30s, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, highs tomorrow 30s to upper 40s for the southwest coast, upper 30s for the Pribilof Islands, and upper 30s to lower 40s elsewhere, especially the Alaska Peninsula, a little warmer, followed by lows in the 20s for the Pribilofs, 30s, and that's about it.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And moving into flying weather, area of IFR here over the Pribilofs, but off the coast everywhere else there in the east-southeast Bering. Aleutians, marginal VFR, same thing for the Alaska Peninsula, on up into Bristol Bay and along and just off the Kuskokwim Delta coast to Nunivak Island. Another band of marginal VFR northeastward there through the Bering Strait. Western Arctic coast becomes IFR for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, south of the Brooks Range. VFR all the way down into the Susitna Valley, northern Cook Inlet, and mostly marginal, looks like to start out with for the Copper River Basin and areas, mainly over the mountainous terrain. IFR possibly up into western Prince William Sound, Passage Canal to Whittier. Some of that will probably spill over to Portage. And IFR for Kodiak Island. VFR for the southeast coast, especially the inside waters. And for the afternoon, IFR here still with southeast flow coming up, bringing lower conditions into Prince William Sound and southern Kenai Peninsula through the Barren Islands there into Kamishak Bay and down to almost Fogneck Island. Kodiak Island, though, marginal VFR. IFR for the Alaska Peninsula. That area shifts southeastward here across southern Bristol Bay and the peninsula. Marginal VFR for the Aleutians. Northward through the Bering Strait. Some more IFR trying to sneak into the western Aleutians out there. IFR for the eastern Arctic coast and eastern North Slope of the interior. Good VFR in most areas. Again, just some areas of marginal VFR for the Matanuska-Susitna Valley and becoming mostly VFR for the Copper River Basin. About the same for Thursday morning. Not much change over the interior with widespread VFR. North of the Brooks Range, though, eastern North Slope and Arctic coast, lower conditions there, and also some IFR possible on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Possible marginal VFR up across the Talkeetnas. Otherwise, most of the moisture staying along the coast here with the IFR again, southern Kenai Peninsula, down across Kodiak Island now, and Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, to on Alaska Island, and about AKwx westward, another band of IFR here with the next system coming into the western southwest Bering Sea. Otherwise, stays mostly marginal here. Could be some breaks, VFR breaks out west there to the Bering Strait, especially in the Chukchi Sea. Panhandle stays VFR. North Gulf Coast VFR. And for the afternoon, front trying to push some moisture into the coastal areas of the Panhandle, so look for a slow deterioration of conditions there throughout the afternoon on Thursday. And all of Prince William Sound now forecast to be IFR. Narrow band still coming in across the southern Kenai Peninsula, maybe into Kamishak Bay, but not as extensive as it was, becoming marginal for Kodiak Island. IFR here, Alaska Peninsula down Alaska Island, and then that next batch out west here covering the western and central Aleutians and into the central Bering Sea, but still west of the Pribilofs. Interior VFR, no change to the eastern North Slope and Arctic coast. Anatuvik for passes Anatuvik, marginal or VFR for both Adigan and Anatuvik. There, marginal VFR for Lake Clark and Merrill, and for Rainy VFR, windy, looking good VFR flying. Same thing for Isabel VFR, Mentasta VFR, and Tanita also looking good VFR. Be some clouds though, and for Portage, marginal VFR, lowest conditions again on the eastern approach, possible IFR there. Chilkoot and White, VFR. And for the freezing levels, kind of looking like a plate of spaghetti now as we progress through May. 2,000 feet, central eastern interior extending southwestward there to just north of Adak and Atka. 4,000 feet now into the eastern interior, 6,000 to 8,000 here over the Northwest Territories of Canada, and running anywhere from 4,000 to maybe 7,000 feet across the southeast coast, so gradually warming up. And the icing chart here showing band of moisture with the front pushing eastward toward the Panhandle, but not quite reaching it tomorrow afternoon, staying well off the coast actually. But that moisture coming up could be some areas of light turbulent or light icing here down across Kodiak Island, and jet stream here southwesterlies up to 80 knots, and then southeasterlies 100 knots, 9,000 feet, something like this, and then 3,000-foot winds, southeast 60 knots right up in toward Prince William Sound, northeast 55 here for Bristol Bay. Turbulence, look for moderate turbulence, northern part of the Panhandle, all the North Gulf Coast, southern Cook Inlet, and the eastern Aleutians.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana.
Thanks.
And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for EPSCoR, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children. You can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah, it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good, very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, EPSCoR, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is EPSCoR, and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, EPSCoR, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS, and she mentioned, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water, and then
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're moving the water around, and then I think they've got some props over there because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
there's
these
the salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way so people can interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant and our we really enjoy it.
No, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right, right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down. And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before. So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about EPSCoR, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKEPSCOR, right? EPSCoR, Alaska EPSCoR, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation, so more to come from that, and a longer-term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Onto marine forecasts for the south coast here. Southeast winds 25 knots, and for the central coast, more of an east-southeast direction there, same speed, 25 knots. Then for the north coast, we've got east winds 25 to 35 knots. And lighter over the inside waters, Lynn Canal north at 15, and for Stevens Passage, southeast at 15. Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots, seas at 6 feet. And then for the day on Thursday, southeast winds 25 knots on the south coast, east winds 20 to 25 knots for the north coast, and southeast 15 for Lynn Canal. Pretty light for Stevens Passage, variable to southeast at about 10 knots, seas pretty slight at 2 feet, and Clarence Strait, southeast winds at 20 knots. For Cook Inlet tomorrow, we've got gale warnings south of the Forelands, northeast 35 knots. Those extend right on down across Kamishak Bay. A little lighter north of the Forelands, but still pretty brisk. Northeast at 30, seas around 9 feet. And then Prince William Sound, east winds 25 knots, seas 6 feet. Gale warnings here for the North Gulf Coast, east to northeast winds at 40, seas up around 15 feet. Barren Islands, east winds 40 knots, seas at 16 feet. For the day Thursday, Prince William Sound, northeast winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Northeast 25 knots, northern Cook Inlet. Southern Cook Inlet, north at 30, northeast at 25 for Kamishak Bay, and the Barren Islands, winds east at 20 knots. And the North Gulf Coast, east to northeast winds 25 to 30 knots, seas 12 to about 12 feet. And then for Kodiak Island, for Wednesday, east to northeast winds 30 to 35 knots. Alaska Peninsula, generally looking at north to northwest winds at about 20 to 25 knots or so. Bristol Bay, northeasterlies at 25. And for Thursday, Kodiak Island, small craft advisories, northeast winds 25 knots. Bristol Bay, same forecast. And northerlies at about 20 to 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Eastern Aleutians, north winds 30 knots tomorrow. Central Aleutians, north winds 30 knots. And farther west, the lighter the winds get, to 15 knots from the north from Kiska to Shemya. And then for Thursday, south to southeast winds 30 knots here for all of the western Aleutians. Adak and Atka north at 25. Gale warnings for the eastern Aleutians. Both in Nemacolin and Alaska Island looking at north winds at 35 knots. And for the southwest coast here for the day on Wednesday, north winds 20 to 25 knots. And St. Matthew Island north at 20. St. Paul, St. George looking at northerlies at 25 knots, seas at about 7 feet. Otherwise, Norton Sound and the St. Lawrence Island, winds will be north at 20 knots. And for Thursday, increase in winds here for the Pribilofs, north at 30 knots and 25 knot northerlies for the southwest coast. Seas about 2 feet there in the ice-free waters. St. Matthew Island northwest at 15, seas at 7 feet. And Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island, north winds at about 20 knots. And moving northward to the Chukchi Sea, light winds out of the north at 10 knots, and the western Arctic coast here northeast at about 10. Same thing for the central coast, northeast winds 10 knots, and then the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, east-northeast at about 10 knots. And for the day on Thursday, winds pretty light all areas here. Eastern Boulevard Sea coast northeast at 10, central coast northeast at 10, and the western Arctic coast northwest at 10. And for the Chukchi Sea here, just call it variable at 5 to 15 knots. And moving on to tonight, that storm system out here over the Aleutians dampens into a trough, pushes southward here, this increasing northeast wind flow over the Bering Sea. Pretty dry wind flow here coming off the land, so the clearing will stay up to the north. Could see some areas of clearing in the interior, but dry from the Arctic coast all the way down till you get in toward southern Cook Inlet and the North Gulf Coast here. It stays dry over the Panhandle tonight with mostly clear skies, some variable mid and high level clouds. And tomorrow that front edges eastward, but not too far, keeps southeast coast in the mostly sunny and warm conditions there. East-southeast winds coming into the Kenai Peninsula. That's where it'll be the wettest again, western Prince William Sound down into Kamishak Bay area. And on next day, dry and mostly sunny over interior Alaska, rain for the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.